The global economy is at a crossroads, fragmented, uncertain, facing rising tariffs and political shifts. From Washington, D.C., the world's top financial minds have gathered for the IMF and World Bank spring meetings, hoping to chart a path through the turbulence. Now, Arise correspondent Kichi Nana is on ground with his report.
The mood is somber here in Washington, D.C., as global financial leaders gather under the darkening economic skies. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank spring meetings have kicked off, not with a bang, but with the groan of a world economy under pressure. The IMF boss, Kristalina Georgieva, is urging nations to start adjusting to a fragmented economic future, one stitched together by regional partnerships and economic realism.
My call is, rather than wishing this away, wishing that the world turns back to where it was, we work hard to make the best out of economic relations. But we are in a multipolar world. We are no more in a world where rules can be easily settled.
Next on the agenda, the IMF will unveil its much-anticipated World Economic Outlook. The expectations, growth projections pared back, uncertainty turned up. And the culprit? A cocktail of US-led tariffs, market volatility, and rising geopolitical risk. With President Donald Trump back in the White House, trade tensions are rattling markets like it's 2018 all over again.
Trade tensions are like a pot that was bubbling for a long time and is now boiling over. To a large extent, what we see is the result of an erosion of trust. Trust in the international system and trust between countries.
And for Nigeria, still reeling from tough law reforms under President Bola Tinubu, the IMF admits the government's economic recalibration, scrapping fuel subsidies, floating the naira, was necessary. But the gains, not yet trickling down to everyday Nigerians. Meanwhile, the World Bank is pushing its new mandate with urgency, and that's jobs. With 1 billion young people entering the workforce in emerging markets, job creation is survival.
And the idea is build a bank that delivers what is demanded, jobs, because jobs is the best way to drive a nail in the coffin of poverty.
So, here's the global dilemma laid bare in DC. Economic fragmentation is the new normal, and the race is on. Not just for growth, but for resilience, relevance, and reinvention. From Lagos to London, Nairobi to New Delhi, Brasilia to Beijing, Cairo to Jakarta, the stakes are high, and the margin for error razor thin. From the IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, Kichi Nana, Arise News.
Now, for more on the IMF World Bank spring meetings, let's now cross over to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Arise business correspondent Rotus Odiri. Rotus, good morning to you. It's good to see you. Surely you've got quite a number of great updates for us. So let's begin with what we can look forward to today in Washington, D.C.
Good morning, Abby. Good to see you as well. Good morning to all our viewers out there. Yeah, I mean, look, Nkechi's reports did, really hit the nail on the head that tariffs are going to be, or rather trade is going to dominate everything else. Normally, we're talking about climate change, Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, and so on and so forth. But really, it's going to be about bilateral trade. So everyone is looking forward to that World Economic Outlook. About 9 a.m. here, which I think will be about 2 p.m. In your time, West African time. And then there'll be the financial stability reports, which will also come out later on in the day. So we'll be dissecting those reports to see how far back the IMF and World Bank have pegged their growth outlooks from their initial levels due to the uncertainty around the tariffs and everything else. So we'll be looking forward to that.
All right, now just a very quick one for our viewers who are, expecting to see Reuters' face. We're trying to sort the feed out, but that's Reuters Odiri, a Rice business correspondent's voice you're hearing there. Now, Reuters, back to you. We understand that Treasury Secretary Scott Bennett will be holding bilateral talks this week. Who will he be speaking to, and what key focal points can we expect to get from these talks?
We understand that Katsunobu Kato, who is the finance minister for Japan, and Choi Mang-sok, who is the finance minister for South Korea, will be meeting with Scott Bessent on the sidelines of these spring meetings here in Washington, D.C. If you remember, the Japanese delegation did meet with the Trump administration. Even Trump was even part of those talks last week, but they didn't come away with anything. Giorgia Meloni of Italy, Prime Minister of Italy, she also met with Trump as well. Italy didn't come away with anything. These trade talks, when it comes to these trade talks, they are extremely complex. They can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months just to discuss with one region or one country. So when the Trump administration says that they have 50 plus countries that want to talk to them, there's a question of the timeline. How long will it take to be able to settle these different bilateral talks? So we'll be expecting to hear some updates from these bilateral meetings with the finance minister from Japan and also from South Korea.
All right, so lots of expectation for today. But Reuters, we also understand that Jerome Powell will be at the meetings this week. Now, in light of ongoing tensions, what are we expecting to hear from him? And also, how have the markets reacted to Trump's attacks on him?
Trump's attacks have roiled investors. Fantastic. Trump's attacks on Jerome Powell have basically unsettled investors because they go at the heart of central bank independence. If you don't have an independent monetary policy authority, that of course is an issue because you don't want the fiscal side dictating that. Powell is expected to reiterate what he said last week in a speech, that he's going to be hesitant on cutting rates because he wants to see the full impact of the tariffs. And again, the uncertainty does not allow for full modeling. So central bank independence is going to be at the heart of what Powell will be talking about when we hear from him here in D.C.
Some very legitimate concerns there. But one lingering question in the air, Reuters, is that the continued U.S. support for the World Bank. That's certainly been a lingering question. What do we know about this, or what should we know about it?
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows about Project 2025. It did call for withdrawal of support from the World Bank and the IMF. But A.J. Banga, president of the World Bank, said that he's had constructive talks with the Trump administration. He's not quite sure if the U.S. will be funding a $4 billion pledge that was made by the Biden administration for emerging markets, for developing countries. So that is in the air. There's also energy finance. Will the U.S. support renewables? Not really. Trump is focusing more on nuclear and other fossil fuels. So Banga, in his expansion on energy finance this week, is expected to pivot away from that. So that's still very much up in the air. World Bank and the IMF are trying to align with Trump's vision so they can keep that U.S. support, but that's still very much up in the air.
All right. But then China, as we know, is also aiming to build alliances away from the U.S. and East Africa is on the map. What is the latest regarding Kenya?
Yeah, President Ruto is heading over to Kenya in order to get funding for a standard gauge railway that is supposed to extend towards the border with Uganda and also other infrastructure projects. So it speaks to China trying to essentially build alliances away from the U.S., as you said. Last week, we had President Xi Jinping heading to Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia. That's the Asian wing. Then you've got this visits of Ruto, who, by the way, Ruto was very pro-Western during his campaign before he became president, and anti-China. So it shows you the shift with the tariffs clouding the relationships between the U.S. There's also AGOA, the African Growth Opportunity Act. We don't know if that will be renewed later on this year. That, of course, has reduced duties on exports from African nations over to the U.S. Kenya exports flowers and the like. So it's a shift, and China is taking advantage of the uncertainty by trying to build those alliances. So the Ruto visit to China is pretty significant.
Yeah, there's certainly a very dynamic shift going there, and trust China to always, keep their eyes peeled. But what can we expect from the Nigerian delegation on ground?
Yeah, the Nigerian delegation, they were in New York last week. The Central Bank of Nigeria, the NGX, they collaborated on an investor outreach. A lot of foreign investors, JP Morgan, Citibank, big asset managers were very, complimentary of Nigeria's reforms with respect to fuel subsidies, exchange rates, and the like. So that will continue here in Washington D.C. Expect to see, members of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Stock Exchange, the Ministry of Finance, talking more about trying to get more investment into Nigeria. Oil prices have fallen, and that is a major cash cow for Nigeria. So it's imperative that Nigeria builds investment from other sources. That will be a lot of that will be talked about from the Nigerian delegation this week.
All right, certainly lots to look forward to. Reuters, of course, you're keeping boots on the ground, and you're going to have a full day ahead of you. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for more from you. All right, then we'll chat to you very soon.